Dan, I just graduated from college 2 years ago. I went to a state college, which meant I saved, over a private college, but it cost a substantial amount of money to go to college now. And I know a lot of peers in my age group feel the same way about student loan debt. It's almost like you graduate and you're crushed by it. Do you have any suggestions for the best way to go about paying off debt, where you can get other sources of financing?
Erin, it's a huge problem of epidemic proportion. Millions of students are struggling with student loan debt. A lot of people are actually calling it the next financial crisis because so many people are in that position. They've gone to school. They didn't get the financial aid packages that schools used to give, where they actually gave money in the form of grants that actually cut the price of your education. Instead, they give aid packages that are almost entirely loans, if not 100% loans. And so you're left eventually footing the bill for the whole thing.
Right.
They don't realize how hard it's going to be after they get out of school to get a job that'll be enough to pay for that.
To just cover, exactly, because if you think about it, you're out of school, you get a job, so you've got all your regular things like rent, maybe a car payment, at least car insurance, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you're going to have this massive debt. You still have to be making a monthly payment on that too.
Yeah, and it can be huge. I mean, it can be
and
as
it goes
big.
For years.
It can be as big as a house payment for a lot of people.
A house payment?
Yeah, it's true, because you actually made a smart choice when you decided to go to a state school, because for the most part, most state schools have tuitions that are a lot lower.
A lot lower. That was part of my reasoning,
schools.
Actually, in going to a state school. I
But
knew I couldn't.
A lot of kids are coming out of college with six-figure debt. And it's interesting too, because one of the things that is particularly tough about student loan debt is that even if you declare bankruptcy, most kinds of debt, if you get way deep in debt on a credit card, if you take on a car loan that you can't afford, you can declare bankruptcy, and a lot of the time you can get all or at least a lot of that debt written off if you meet the requirements for bankruptcy. But student loans got a special provision where they can actually survive bankruptcy.
So even if you declare personal bankruptcy, your student loans are going to follow you around?
You'd still owe all that money on the student loans. Once those loans are there's not as much to do about it. Really, your best preventative measure is to try to take steps in advance, not to incur the debt in the first place.
So what are some of those steps that students or prospective students can take?
One, probably the biggest one that people are starting to do, is taking into account the costs of the colleges that you're thinking about going to. It used to be that the decision about going to college was more about you should go to the best college you could possibly get into. And now people are questioning that. They're saying, is it really worth it for me to go to this more expensive college than to go to this other college that may not have quite as good of a reputation, but it's a lot cheaper and it'll leave you a lot less in debt in the future.
I also think that if you're going to a college, let's say you're going to your second option college, your plan B college versus your plan A.
Yeah.
Typically, if there's a greater chance that you'll end up getting some kind of scholarship grant or financial aid package or other incentives, because they want to attract more students.
You bet. And that's an important thing to consider too, as you're trying to decide which college to go to. Really shop around on the financial aid packages that they offer. I think that depending on if you have a lot of colleges looking to get you to go there,
right, recruiting you,
then you can actually kind of have a negotiation where it's like, oh well, I'd love to go to your school, but unfortunately this other school gave me a better financial aid package, and you can kind of haggle back and forth. It ends up being like buying a car almost, where it's like, oh, can you top this offer? Oh well, they came back with this other offer. I'd really like to go there. These steps are things that people would never even have thought of not that long ago.
Yeah. Well, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned previously, I graduated 2 years ago, And several of my peers decided to basically skip trying to get a job right now just because the recession seemed so bad, and then just went to grad school instead. Do you think that's a financially good decision? Because that seems to me like you're just going to be adding more debt.
If the only reason that you're doing it is
just to avoid the economy,
then
it's
not a good idea. You know, it's tempting because a lot of the loans that they'll offer, there are different kinds of loans. Some are offered by the federal government, others are offered directly through banks. The ones that the federal government offers will often let you stop making payments while you're in school, and that's a good. That's part of the reason why.
So you could just defer payments.
Why people go back to graduate school is because they can defer the payments. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, even though the payments are deferred, the interest is continuing to build, and so not only are you generating more debt because you have to pay your grad school tuition, but the original balance,
debt is still there.
In some cases, is it's always still there,
but it's continuing to grow.
Sometimes it goes up too.
Is there anything you can do to cut down your payments or make it easier on yourself?
One thing to consider, although it's not an automatic thing, is consolidating your loans. Basically what that involves is combining all, if you have a whole bunch of different loans from different places, combining them all into one single loan with one payment. And a lot of the time you can get terms that are more attractive. But you have to be really careful because, again, it depends on which loans you have. Depending on what kinds of loans you have, you may end up paying a higher interest rate that way. You may end up paying for a lot longer of a time period than you would have with your original loan. So it's not an automatic thing.
It's not an automatic thing.
You have to really look at it and then compare how you end up in both situations.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for giving us some really great advice about college debt.
Glad to help.